So my background is 30 years of implementing change. It's very interesting. It's actually over 30 years now, which makes me feel really old. And when I started working, we had a Tory party split over Europe. Liverpool won the league, and my team, West Ham, got relegated. So it's amazing how little things actually change. So primarily, I've been working on the years on financial services. As you can tell, I'm from London. I've worked in the city. I've done a lot of work in technology change at the moment. And the last couple of years, what I've been doing is Brexit. So, not really, no. Which is going to come to a grinding halt on Friday evening, really. So I'm hopefully the government will be able to spin it out for another couple of months or couple of decades. 10 years would be good, so I can retire. Also, I do a few other things which I'll scroll down anyway, but I'm going to shamelessly promote myself. I'm a chair for a number of charitable organisations. One's around acting and one's around gambling addicts. So if you're an addict or a gambler or you want an acting job, come and find me afterwards. I've written a number of books on various areas. One's around freelancing, and I'm actually, at the moment, doing a book on change management. I'm somewhat annoyed because I'm actually having musical differences with the publisher at the moment, so I would have actually had a chance to shamelessly publicise it here. I do various speaking on subjects, hence why I'm up here, mentoring. I've worked for the Open University, I've got an MBA from the Open University, and I do a lot of work with the British Computer Society. So, firstly, before we delve into the guts of it, change is a very, very different phrase. People call it different things. People call it change management. Anyway, so basically if you Google or Yahoo and other popular sport engines, you go what change is, you probably find hundreds, if not thousands of definitions. They're all very vague. And some stress that change is a proactive thing, like let's go and make something happen, let's make life better, let's upgrade our systems, let's lead the EU. And some people think it's very much an emergent nature, like, well, it sort of just happened, really. You know, why did you change it? I didn't. We just carried on doing what we did, and it all changed. But for the purpose of this presentation, because if we don't agree with this, the rest of the slides are going to be a load of rubbish. For the purpose of this presentation, we're going to say that it's a proactive change or an alteration to an organisational activity, which is a polite way of saying you plan to make the change. So basically, the theme of the presentation is going to be sort of like 7 main bullets I want to talk through around basically try and make change more successful. So the first one is to make change more successful, you need to do some sort of systematic and controlled process. I remember the days with software development where, a few of you may be around about my age, there was no process at all. You know, you used to test it and hack it around, and once it worked, you put it live, and you think, we'll test it in production, and if it doesn't work, we'll try and take it out, or we'll use a power. But now changes are massively processed, and it's not just technology changes across everything. So that also means, a change, you need sort of things like project plans, and you need to be able to manage risk logs. From a technology point of view, you need testing processes, deployment processes. In my case, if I run it, rollback processes, all stuff like that. So it's a very, very big process. I think the other one, which often when I work, my background is in technology many years ago, was coping with uncertainty. I used Brexit again, but there's so much uncertainty over Brexit. No one really knows what Brexit's going to look like, although we've got 295 days to implement it from Friday. But there's lots of changes happening at the moment. So one of the biggest challenges you have is the ability to cope and manage with uncertainty of change. Challenges around that is, if you're developing software, you need requirements. I know you can do Agile and all of those processes that work around it. But if you don't know what you've got to develop, you don't know what you develop. So it's a case of managing that. And that's actually quite hard to do, actually, and especially trying to explain to senior members of management. The next one is hard work. People have to work long hours, put a lot of effort in. It requires a lot of focus, so if you're working on a change project or a software project or a testing project, you need to really focus on what you do and work out what you're going to do, have clear success criteria. It leaves a lot of determination, You've got to work long hours again. It needs a lot of dedication. No doubt everybody around here has worked weekends, bank holidays, and a few of you might have worked Christmas Day. So it's a long piece of process. And the bit that my old boss told me many, many years ago, the devil's in the detail. So I remember years ago we was working on a piece of software. It was actually written in COBOL, which is, for those, is 1970s. And there was actually the software defect was we couldn't find. It was actually due to an extra space put at the end of a command. Instead of like space at the end, it was space, which completely changed the entire meaning of the command. And it spent hours and hours to go through that. And I think after that I learned the devil's in the detail. And there was a lot of stuff on that. The next one is people, or to give it its more trendy name, stakeholder management is essential. While technology is a very sort of like a quantitative type process, people are involved in everything. So you've got to manage the human element. You know, if you're expecting people to work long hours, people to do a lot of dedicated work, you need to work long. You need to manage the element. The other thing also, which is very keen at the moment, is regular and appropriate communication. If you're working on a big project or a big change where there's a massive technology input or no technology input, people find it very demotivating if they don't know what's going on. So when you have these big programs of work, you should always have some sort of communications work stream or a communications work channel. And the other thing down here, which is very vague and doesn't really mean anything to everybody, is that a supportive culture is essential. I think I've worked at places, mainly American. Nobody works for American banks, do they? No, just inside's good. So when I worked for some American banks, there were this alpha male culture. It was quite brutal. You know, people were worried about making mistakes. So basically, the only way to don't make a mistake is not to do anything. Thank you. And but you also need a supportive culture. So things do go wrong. Yeah, I mean, the best thing in the world, things go wrong. So basically, it's a case of having a culture that people are happy to look after. The other one is change is not an island, which is my way to try and sound cultured. Well, basically means if you're implementing any sort of change, whether it's a business change, a regulatory change, technology change, upgrading a building, you can't do it on your own. You need people to be involved. And this could be other parts of your firm or your company you work with. For example, it could be other teams, other departments. Bear in mind some of these teams and departments could be across different time zones, different locations. You also need to liaise with a number of external parties, suppliers or customers. I mean, one of the things I'm working with at the moment, virtually everything they do is outsourced to different firms. So basically you have this great mythology where the firm I work with is very much DevOps at the moment, very, very innovative from their point of view. But you're working with suppliers who probably don't even know what DevOps is. They probably think it's a place in Austria or something like that. They're very much into waterfall and planning and writing everything down to the most minute detail. So you've got one culture which is like roll, roll, roll. The other culture is like roll and we'll put it live in 6 months. You know, and the other points, one thing one of the colleagues mentioned earlier is like on-the-fly releases. This firm would never do an on-the-fly release unless it was planned 4 months in advance type thing, you know. So you had a massive difference, a massive cultural difference. And likewise, we've worked with like customers, the same. You know, if you're working with a customer, a B2B customer, and you want to integrate with their systems, if you want to deploy stuff, you've got to make sure what you're doing fits in with them. And it's probably more important that way because they pay the bill. So the last thing you want to do is annoy them, or they won't pay the bill. And likewise with industry parties, you know, for example, you're integrating to your banking system or the Inland Revenue Tax system and the VAT system, you know, you need to ensure that, you know, your deployment processes and your change process links with them. So what you end up with is this complete hodgepodge of different cultures, different processes, and none of them really work. And it basically creates a lot of stress, really, for no reason at all. And this is probably my almost the sixth of the seven, or almost there, I hear you cheer hooray. It's competent and relevantly skilled people are required. This sounds completely obvious, but it's amazing how many people don't actually follow this up. And this actually goes, I put down project sponsor, but really if you're putting a change in, and whether it's you're inputting like Nick's tool into a company, you need people at the top who get it, you know, understand what the project is or what you're trying to do. You also need support from the top, you know. So if you're going to put in a complicated change, you need the top person to be supportive of it. You need a competent change manager, you know, whether that is a business change or a highly technology change, and that involves understanding the technical detail of what you're doing, as well as trying to understand managing the people and all the suppliers and all the other stuff that goes with it. SMEs, subject matter experts, by the way, I suppose the small, medium enterprises. You need technical people. I mean, the stuff you do is very, very, very complex. You know, you're 58 bright women and men. You know what you're doing. So you need relatively skilled people on this, and that's actually a lot harder than you can get. You try and recruit people. You read every CV. They look like they're Albert Einstein, everybody. But you need a way of ensuring the right people are on there. You also need to build a good team culture. I mean, I always say we all fail. No, one of us fails, we all fail. Oh, well, I normally fail, but the idea is you want to try and build a culture where the team all look after each other and work together. So really, it's a competent and relatively skilled people as well, and that's actually a lot harder than you think, because if you're doing a very complex project, say for example you are creating a new office, say in France or something like that, you could have a lot of development in technology, you've got a lot of legal change, you've got a lot of other change, and you need to have the right skills to blur them all together. And the last one, and almost finished now, is that change is a journey. And this is a bit of a cliche, but unfortunately it's one of those true cliches. And therefore you need to expect problems. Many of us have worked on transformation projects. We're going to reinvent the wheel and we're going to be the greatest thing in the world. And after 2 years of going around in circles and spending £20 million, the CEO gets sacked and basically you don't bother doing it. So you need to be very realistic what you can do, and obviously this is where you end up over the years the mythologies of agile and these small incremental releases have come in. So you've got to be very careful what you can do. And the most important thing is a certain change, and this technology change and other changes you can't rush. There's like, I've read somewhere, some bright PhD person has mentioned there's a natural pace to any change. Some changes you can't rush, it's too complicated. Like employing, going back to Nick again, because he's actually sitting here and I'm looking at him, looking at the package he's implemented. If you rush that in, you could create more problems than you're actually trying to save. So you've got to be very careful. And I always use this diagram to try and end off on the thing, which is like a change curve. And also, unfortunately, I can't get the pointer to work on this anyway. Oh, yes, I can. So when you start off a project, you're all very happy. And you think, well, we're going to change the world, aren't we? We're going to be Apple next year. Then you get a certain amount of enthusiasm and everything's going brilliant, isn't it? And then suddenly you get a kick in unpleasant parts and things start going wrong. Maybe your first release don't work, or you can't get your service to work, or your first client suddenly says, well, we really weren't that interested. And then you get a bit more worried and you go down here and you have, well, that's right, you're in complete panic mode now, isn't it? And this is actually quite good when you use external suppliers, because you can start suing them and write the notes off and things like that. So you go down to complete panic, and then you go down to despair and you'll start crying and things like that. But basically what happens is reality sort of clicks in, you suddenly realise maybe we're a little bit ambitious, and then you start to feel a bit better, you stabilise, and then you run normally. And this sort of, what's it called, an S-curve or something, or a G-Wiz curve, this goes on forever. And I've worked on probably about 100 change projects in my life, and I think this sort of thing has appeared on everything. And therefore, that brings me to a very early end to my conversation. So if you want to contact me, that's my email address, so feel free to email me. Twitter, well, that's called a handle, is that the right phrase? If you want to speak to me on Twitter, let me know. That's my LinkedIn. I was going to shamelessly publish my new book, but I'm still having arguments, musical differences, with my publisher. I think J.K. Rowling has the same publisher as me. So, and last but not least, I did write a book on contracting. So thank you for your listening and for your time.